First of all, I want to say thank you very much for being invited here. It's an honor to be invited into a network that's already going on. As a matter of fact, I come from the outside world in many respects. I come from out of town, from the Devil's Island, I think it's called. And also I come from out of system. I come from a totally private organization, and I come from a foundation that is called the Helene Else Center. It's quite new. It's only been in progress for about 5-6 years, and it lies on or rests on a very, what can you say, rich and wealthy private foundation called Ludwig and Sarah Elsass Foundation. Helene Elsass herself, I'll just give you a little short background of from where I come. Helene herself was suffering from cerebral palsy. All of you, of course, know what that is, so I don't need to go into that. But she left all her inheritance from a big amount of money for a foundation that should work and try to deal with best strategies and best ways of dealing with cerebral palsy in any respect. And one of the ways that the board of directors found that would be a good and proactive way of doing it was to open a center that has as its aims, as its objective, to work out and innovate on best practice within the dealing with cerebral palsy. And that's what we are doing at Helene Else Center. We work with applied research, not basic, only applied. We are the toolbox, we are the playground, we are the innovation house. But in order for that to work, we need something that is very, very important: evidence-based knowledge. In the way that we focus on evidence-based situations and developing that is, of course, along the way, but it's also to start with. We see many situations where children with brain damage, which is our main point, main objective, not being treated the right way, not being treated accordingly to cutting-edge research, because there is a limit of resources in the system outside. So first of all, we need to find out what would be the best way if there would be unlimited researches to deal with brain damage. That's in fact the first evidence-based situation that is really interesting here. So I'll get a little into that, but first I'll start with the conditions that we are in. We have some socioeconomic conditions, and they clearly tell us that children with brain damage require a multifaceted training strategy, but they also tell us the conditions that they don't get that because it is too expensive. We have not enough warm hands, and the ones we have are too expensive. So we need to do something about this. We also know from our diagnosis, many other diagnoses would have the same, I think, way of dealing with telling how it goes in society, but these are very scaring figures. I don't want to go into them really. So what can we do about this? Well, let's go to cutting-edge research then. First of all, we deal with the brain, and the first and very important thing here, well, I have to go through this a bit fast. The most important thing here is that you must not look upon the brain as a localized brain. You have to look upon it as a circuitative brain. I think that's the most important thing nowadays. One of the ones who have dealt with that is Andrew Ralph McIntosh. Another thing we get from the science of sport, they have long time ago, well, at least 2 years, established a consensus that if you try to divide the training and learning into perception, cognition, and the behavior, motor behavior, you're wrong. You cannot train and learn cognitive items in the morning and something else in the afternoon. It's all combined. That is where we start out when we want to make our system to work. We have a lot of collaborators. One of them, very important one, is Mark Beer. Maybe some of you know him. He's professor of neurology at MIT. We had him at the center 2 months ago for a whole week. Very important well of knowledge. The core of our way of doing this is that consciousness, perception, and cognition are truly inseparable. We look upon the person as being an embodied being, a person that only deals with being conscious in the acting with the world. That means the phenomenological ways of thinking that Merleau-Ponty invented a long time ago, but we really deal with that way of looking at a person. We know for sure now that Descartes was wrong. So what we do is that we try to take research, published research. That's always where the scientists, they deliver their research. If you take it from scratch there and over the bridge to the community, the primary care, nothing will really happen. You have to have something in between, a practice lab, an innovation, a test place, where you can play with things to get it to work. And that's what we do. To do that, we need knowledge. And we have, I don't know what the G is doing down there. We have signed a partnership with Copenhagen University, 2 departments in the university that are very essential to us. The Institute of Sports and Science and the Institute of Neuroscience. So at the moment we have Professor Jens Bo Nielsen from University of Copenhagen with us 2 days a week. And with him we have at the moment 4 PhD students that are only working with trying to evidence-base what we're doing. Because we know we need to do that, of course. Around the world we have some very close relationships also. Collaboration with Michael Merzenich from San Francisco University. Michael Merzenich, maybe some of you knows from games. He is the one who invented Fast Forward, which is a system that at the moment deals with 90,000 children in US via the internet. He's the one that have the firm called POSIT. He was the one who invented cochlear implant. We also work along with Alain Berthaud from Collège de France, probably the person in this world that knows most about how human behavior motor-wise. Giovanna Scioni from Pisa University. At the moment we are in a big EU project trying to develop a setup that can train babies from 0 to 1 year old in a, what can you say, converted, technological based baby gym at the home via the internet. Rosalind Boyd, Queensland University, is at the moment trying our system out in a clinical testing with 95 children in Australia. So how do we get to this? How do we get to this proof of concept or innovation? Well, first of all, we know that you can start from many ways from many point of departure when you want to innovate. But I've just taken 2 along here. You can either start from the idea, you can start from the demand. No matter from where you start, you need a team of innovators. No one brain knows it all. It's not like the old days when we had George Gooflus, I think he's called in English, Georg Gierløs. We don't have people now secluded in a research and development area. We need to have them in a team. We need brains to work together. Co-innovation is enormously amount of resources. Just think about it. 120 billion neurons in each brain in contact with 10,000 other neurons. And at the moment, 7 billion brains. Because of Facebook and other social technologies, no more than 5 steps away from each other. It's enormous capacity. Therefore, we always, in our setup, deal with teams, deal with many brains. We know that no one brain knows it all. Jairo Gierløs is called. Couldn't remember that 1 slide ago. So innovation is no longer this lab, it's working together. What we innovate from is knowledge. As I said before, our point of departure is that the brain is dynamic, circuitative. It needs to be induced that way. So, in fact, there's no difference between cognition and motor behavior, not from the brain's point of view, and therefore not from our point of view. All this is very important when you want to develop and invade a system that should learn and train the brain. Priming the brain needs to be done from this point of view. So if you can develop training programs, learning programs, where body and thought are meant to work together, you come the furthest. Randolph McIntosh from Toronto University have, with these small figures, just shown that the same 3 areas in the brain can be part of many different circuits, networks. As he says, there might be regions that are critical for special behavior, but there's no one behavior that arises from one area in the brain, and there's no one area in the brain that can control one behavior. In fact, it looks as if the brain is so dynamic that it does not even use the same network for the same behavior from time to time. This is important when you want to develop systems that train and learn. Because it's too easy just to take what has been done yesterday and then turn it into a computer-based system. That wouldn't help very much. In our respect, if you just put up a camera in front of a physiotherapist and a camera at home and did what you did yesterday, nothing would happen. Because nothing happened yesterday. The only amount of money you would save would be the transport. So you have to deal, when you want to develop new technologies, you have to deal with cutting-edge research as a first step. Neuroplasticity is our tool. Neuroplasticity is not a new thing. The brain has always been a neuroplastic brain. That means it's changed by experience and behavior. What we are interested in at our way of dealing with training and learning is more in detail synaptic plasticity. But 18 minutes is not enough to get into that. We know that functional changes in the brain is needed for perceptual learning. Dendritic spines must grow for a new skill to develop. It takes time. And it has to be done in the right way. These slides are just showing that we know that it happens. One of the best studies come from Max Planck, saying that the development of dendritic spines is the basis of knowledge and memory, learning and memory. But also that these spines, once developed, can adapt to similar experiences in the future. That means we have a fundamental basic circuit in the brain that can be trained and have transfer effects. Synaptic plasticity, we can strengthen, become faster, and also, of course, the obvious increased interplay between brain and muscles, the production of BDNF in the brain and for the brain, the production of acetylcholine for the motor junction, for example. It's a very good way of win-win spin-off for brain and body co-work. So how do we do when we then have to put it into a system, a computer-based system? That was our aim, because we needed to do that. Well, we know that training works. Science of Sports tells us that 10,000 hours is what you need to be as good as you can for any kind of skill. We deal with neuroplasticity. 3 main issues here. The developmental one, we can't touch that. You have to go into gene therapy. The endogenous automatic one is the one that is expressed when you have a trauma of some kind. That is also out of our league. But the one that we can work with is the induced one. The ones that can be induced from the outside through programs, psychological programs, pedagogical programs, physical programs, or best, a combination of it all. So we developed this system that we call Move It to Improve It. The reason we developed our system ourselves was because the ones that you can buy with the Wii, the Sony iToy, the Kinect, they are no use because they cannot be individualized. You can't put into the games how big you want the racket to be. You can't decide where the balls come from. You can't decide the complexity of the balls. You can't decide the speed of the balls. So these are toys, very good for people who can. But we needed to deal with people who cannot. So we needed to develop our own. And that we did along with Innovation Lab at Aarhus University and people from a company that was a private company called Headfitted. It's a cloud computing system that takes its point of departure alongside with Michael Mersnick, with whom we work very closely together. And we know that if we want to induce changes in the brain's plasticity, we need 4 items to work together. It needs to be intensive. And we have dealt with that to find out how intensive does it need to be. And we know from clinical research along with Copenhagen University that it has to be more than a quarter of an hour between 2 periods of sleep. Normally we call it more than a quarter an hour a day. That's only because we have decided to sleep at night and be awake at day. It's a sleeping period that is essential because that is where consolidation happens. So we need to get more than quarter of an hour a day. And in order to get the dendritic spines to develop enough also to go through the stage of pruning, we need to go more than about 16 weeks. So we need more than half an hour a day and more than 16 weeks. Less than that, no matter if you use technology or not, will not be able to change over time the plasticity of the brain. So it's not enough to develop a system and then hope for the best. You also have to develop the knowledge. We work with, in our system, half an hour a day, 20 weeks. And then we come to the clinical testing of it, that we do along with University of Copenhagen. We know also that if you want to learn the best, it has to be repetitive, but only to a certain degree. If it's automated, the brain turns off the neuroplasticity. So it must also be challenging. That balance is very essential. That's why our system is built up so that we can change progressively the limit of how difficult it is over time. Once a week, we change the system in a cloud computing manner. So the children or the grown-ups or whoever is at the other end, they will find that how they develop will change the system over time. The most important thing to learn and train is to be actively to paying close attention. When these 4 things work together, we have really good results. This is the build-up of the system. What is controlling what is happening from the camera of the system? It is built in the same manner, you could say, as we in iToy, is a color. The color of green, that green there is chroma green. That is what our system is programmed to see. So any other colors it doesn't see. That means that the healthcare professional can put the color on the part of the body that they want to be control point. The head here in this picture, it could be the arm, the elbow, or whatever. Whatever is decided from a healthcare point of view. Because our system has to be adjusted and set up by professionals. It's not something that you can buy and take home and say, okay, I want to train my own brain. It has to be done in a situation where we find the individual baseline, set up the first part of the system, and then progressively follow it over time. It takes about half an hour a week to do it for one person. That means that the therapists at our center, they can have about 20 people each in training. There is the cost-benefit part of it. What we do is we want to train the whole person, so to speak. They need to use their attention. They need to go through the stages to come to action and behavior. That way we train or aim to train the whole body, the whole person. The data that we get in is both qualitative and quantitative. Let's start with the qualitative ones. These are the ones that I'm personally most interested in. I know that the people we work with at the university, they want to measure everything, really, to a point where it's too much. But that's their way of looking upon life. I want to have the qualitative data. I want to speak to the people who have been through this program. And what I hear from them is that the most important thing that they get from the training period is self-confidence. What the people in Copenhagen University can measure is that they get a lot more power in their muscles. They get a better balance. But what I'm interested in is self-confidence. So what we see here is that we provide the families with knowledge and insight as a first step. And then they provide themselves with 20 weeks of home training. We are all the time, as a virtual coach, looking into what is happening and changing it. So they have their own coach, they're motivated, they find and feel ownership, they have a positive mind, they get better self-confidence and self-respect. So what we can see is that participation and activity is increased on all three levels: community, individual, and family. That is what I'm personally interested in. But of course, we also need to get it out in this literature, the evidence-based literature, all these papers that between 7 and 12 people read. That is very important. But we do get it out there. And of course, we have to go along with that. Play. But I want to just let that talk for itself. That was as far as I can get in this short time.